The road to intra-African trade, I think, like a live broadcast, is never a straight one. So we may take many turns and twists before we finally get to our destination. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our first debate on the intra-African trade. Now, I don't know how many of you in this room are as old as I am going to go back, because I think the genesis of the problems that we have in Africa about intra-African trade go back to 1884, 1885, when Otto von Bismarck, the German chancellor, and amongst his other European friends, decided to carve up Africa. And so what did the Africans do? In 1963, in October, the Organization of African Unity was born with a very clear mandate, the political liberation of Africa. And then that was followed in 1999, on the 9th of September, by Thabo Mbeki and more than 30 other African leaders who sat down and said, okay, we had the OAU fighting for political liberation. The next stage has got to be integration, economic liberation. So, how far have we got? How well have we done? Unfortunately, the statistics are not very good, because when you compare our East-world masters, the Europeans, they trade 4 times as much as we do, 60%. You go to the Chinese, 51% in their Asian neighbors. You go to North America, 51% in their neighbors. And us, we sit around 15%. So, what is the problem? We have a problem. But on the panel here, I've got the problem solvers. Let me introduce them, and let me tell you who they are. I have with me a politician. I'll ask you to identify which one. I also have a businessman. You can find him if you know him. Importantly, I've got an economist, right? Problem solver, right? But I also have a chicken farmer. And I want you to guess who my chicken farmer is. Let me introduce my guests. Your Excellency, President Olusegun Obasanjo, former President of Nigeria, Chairman of the Advisory Council, sir, thank you for coming through and chairing the intra-African Trade Fair.
Thank you very much.
Next to him, on my left, Dr. Benedict Orama. He's the President, Chairman of the Board of Directors of Africa Export-Import Bank. Sir, thank you for coming through.
Thank you very much.
We also have Mr. Tarek Kabil. He's the Minister of Trade and Industry of the Arab Republic of Egypt. Sir, thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Last but not least, the man who makes it all happen, right? The man who puts money down and backs it, the words of the politicians, Mr. Ahmed El Sewidi, President and CEO of El Sewidi Electric. Thank you, sir, for coming through.
Thank you.
Let me begin with, did you know, my chicken farm. Thank you for coming through, Mr. President. In 1963, you were a young man. I calculated backwards and I found you were 26. You then have been able to watch the leg of progress, or the progress that we've made if we have tried to build the African continent. When you look specifically at the issue of intra-African trade, say, in 2 minutes, can you tell me what the problem, the main problem has been?
Well, thank you very much. Let me see what I can do in 2 minutes, but if I cannot do it in 2 minutes, you will give me extra minute. You got my age a little bit wrong, but by 1963, I was a little bit older than you tried to make me. But that's all right. Now, what happened is, I was particularly lucky because I grew up about the end of 40, 50, when I was in secondary school, and when the fervor of independence was very high in Africa, and particularly in my country. And then I left school, and for probably what I would call providence, I joined the army. And then I joined the army, I went to UK, I spent about 2 years in UK. And the first thing that struck me was the difference in development in my own country and in UK. I came back just before independence, towards the end of 1959. And at independence, I was there. And immediately after independence, I was one of those who first went to the Congo in 1960. And what struck me in the Congo was, in fact, the level of development, which was much worse than the level of development in Nigeria. But having seen the development in Britain, having seen the development in Germany, in Western Germany at that time, as a result of doing an attachment for 3 months in Germany with the British Army in Germany, I was struck with the underdevelopment by the colonial powers, particularly the Belgians in the Congo. Now, of course, we all hailed the independence in the early 60s, and our leaders rightly decided that there must be unity. Because, as you rightly pointed out, in 1984-85, we were disunited unwillingly. And but our leaders decided that, yes, we must try and come together. All right, they got it right. Eventually, they had the 1963, we had the OAU, but OAU was only for political. Decolonization. Our leaders believe that once we decolonize and once we have independence, all other things will be given unto us. But it didn't happen that way. The colonial masters, because of our agitation, gave us independence. But it turned to be flag independence. And we did not see through that, unfortunately. So what did we have? We had Francophone, Anglophone, Lusophone, Arabophone. Now, but before that, before the colonial masters came, we had African phone. We were trading among ourselves. We didn't have this separation and these silos. And the silos are still there. So that really is the main problem of our development, of our trading. Before colonial powers, we had community trading, we had regional trading, trading by barter. If you are a shepherd, a cattleman, you give the cropman animal, and he will give you something. Then you trade in other things within the region. And then with we had even international trade.
Sure.
But it was not parceled in Francophone, Anglophone, Lusophone, Arabophone.
Was the problem that when we got that political independence, we did not tackle the economic issues immediately? No. Because when you go back to Berlin, they did not just parcel out Africa politically. They were also putting Africa into these blocks so they could trade with them.
Yes. And you will find that even when we had independence, they let us have independence. As somebody told me, well, since you were agitating for independence, we're giving you independence. We are not worried about your political independence. We are worried about the economy. And that is our interest. And they held on to the economy. We did not understand that. We did not. Now we have started to understand it. Better late than never. That is why on the 20th of March this year we had African Continental Free Trade Area. And that is why with the, I must commend Afrexim Bank, AU, and the Department of Export in this country for going for the intra-African trade fair.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me come to the man who has been part of it, and you say it has been now beholden on them to try and see if they can carry forward the vision. Minister, from your perspective, how important is that Africa Free Trade Area? What difference practically do you see it making? Because we often talk about what we need done, and yet there are so many other things that we can do. For instance, tariffs reduction. These are discussion amongst us, things that we can do on our own.
I think I just want to go back to His Excellency comment. I think Africa passed through several stages: liberalization, and then stability, and then building internal systems, and then infrastructure building, and then trade. When the trade started to happen in Africa, it started to happen in certain groups. So you have all the Arab countries are part of the GAFTA agreement. You have the COMESA, you have the SADC, you have West Africa. There are two issues, very important issues: trade and manufacturing. Because one of the challenges of Africa is how to convert the rich resources like raw materials into a manufacturing product in order to increase the added value of Africa. So trade is the first step, and it's extremely important. If you look to the trade level is extremely low. I mean, Egypt exports about $4 billion to Africa. This is less than 1%.
Sure.
So most of the export happen
of total export.
Exactly. Happen to China, to EU, and many other countries. The Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement is I would say, a milestone, significant step forward toward integration. Trade is very much linked to investment and very much linked to all the other KPIs, like reducing employment, like improving GDP. Yeah. Africa growth is significantly higher than the world GDP growth. Yeah. So this is a very important step for Africa. So coming back to the Africa CFTA, I would say very important. I think 44 countries have signed already, and once 22 countries have authorized the signatures, the agreement will be intact, and that includes tariff reductions. Gradually, it depends on the level of advancement of every country. Sure. So we are looking very much. We're one of the countries who signed the agreement. And we'll support it all the way.
But Minister, that's the problem, isn't it? Because you have got 44, or 45 that have committed, and yet it's only been ratified by 4. Again, we are moving too slowly, aren't we?
No, but this is usual. In every large free trade agreement like Africa CFTA, it does require a certain number, which is probably half. I mean, we had a debate during the discussion, but that's probably half of the countries who've signed it. Sure. So hopefully it will be signed soon. Once it's signed, it goes into effect. Yeah. And then what's important is not just the agreement goes into effect, is one, respect the agreement, to use it for trade, but more importantly, build on it for investment.
Sure. I'm going to ask the difficult question to the Mr. President, but I'm reserving it for now. I'm coming back with that big question. Mr. Orama, I want you to help us here with the statistics, because often we just talk about the fact that Africa is not trading with itself. But when you put it into like dollars and cents, this is the problem, isn't it? I'm talking of dollars and cents. I'm not talking of Egyptian pounds. Neither am I talking of rand. When we put it into real monetary terms, these are huge sums that we are sending outside the continent each year, and then every year we complain, oh, our currencies are weak. They are weak because we're sending the money outside, right? How bad is it?
Well, it's bad, but it's not just sending money outside that is the problem. It is the other benefits that we lose by not trading amongst ourselves. When countries trade amongst themselves, they gain better comparative advantage in a dynamic sense. They are better prepared to compete globally. If you look around the world, regions that trade more amongst themselves are the most developed. Right. Those that trade the least, like Africa, are the least developed. So out of the $1 trillion of total African trade, You have intra-African trade accounting for $150 billion. That is too low. Even if we add informal intra-African trade, which some estimate to levels as high as $40 billion, is still low. So we need to do something about it. We need to make sure that we raise the values to levels that are closer to what others have achieved, as you mentioned. Levels that are closer to 40, 50%. That way we'll begin to reap the benefits of regional, intra-regional trade. If we don't trade amongst ourselves, we are not going to see intra-regional investments. We are not going to see regional infrastructure because governments do not have the money to build infrastructure. The infrastructure will emerge from public-private partnerships. But the public-private partnership can only come when building the infrastructure makes economic sense. And it is trade that will make the infrastructure that you build across borders to be economical, to make it worth an investor's while. So beyond the trade that is diverted, because I believe most of them are diverted because of a colonial, colonial history.
Yeah.
The biggest problem is all the things we lose because we are not trading amongst ourselves.
Absolutely. Let's get testimony of just how difficult it is to trade amongst ourselves. Mr. El Sawidi, you are based here in Cairo, but you have overcome the stereotypes about trading within the African continent. How have you been able to do it?
We really began in Africa since almost now over 20 years. Africa is not easy. First, to manufacture, to have a manufacturing plants in Africa, I think it's much more expensive than to manufacture in Switzerland.
Sure.
So it's it's not easy to manufacture there. If the governments will not support manufacturing in Africa, it's really difficult to put a manufacturing plant there. But even for trading, it's not that easy much because the logistic from shipping from Egypt to Africa, it's not that much easy to ship there. Maybe from China is much easier or other places. So really, it was not easy to begin such an operation, but we insisted. We believe very much that Africa is our main growth. It's the normal growth for Egypt, and we share with them a lot of even the custom, the tradition, some things. So we are able to deal with them easily, sure, which is much more difficult for others. Most of the investments in Africa have been very fruitful for us in the last 20 years. And we are still going ahead and investing more and more. And for us, inviting them to Egypt every month and visiting us and seeing the operations. Yeah. And Egypt for us is one, of course, it's the best manufacturing place worldwide.
Sure.
Yeah.
What's been the critical thing in your view that has enabled you to be able to crack the African market?
The most important?
Yes.
The most important thing to tackle them is the way we deal with them and how we make with the governments and how we know their problems, how we know their needs, and we're trying to reach their targets in a short time, which others are not doing it.
Right.
We are almost offering them solutions, especially for the electricity and for the energy, which they have less than 15% electrification.
Yeah.
So we have gross.
What about the traditional problems? Payments, logistics at the borders. I don't know what the borders are like here.
Yes, of course, payments and these things is not easy, but really our cooperation with the African Exim Bank, which has been now the last 10 years, and we have really made with them very good partnership. Sure. And by the way, countries, governments, with bank, with private sector, I think we can make miracles.
Sure.
And this is what we have did with the African Exim Bank.
Final question for now. What difference did African Exim Bank make in your view to make you be able to trade more with the rest of the continent?
That we bring it for them profitable, or let's say, or project, feasible project, bankable project. We discuss with them. They visit with other country. Okay. We discuss with the government, okay, and we make a deal between us and the bank and the government itself.
Mr. President, I promised a difficult question. It's about two elephants that are in the room, or perhaps not in the room. Nigeria and South Africa, not part of the Africa Free Trade Area at the moment. Well, how can we talk about integrating the continent economically when our biggest players are outside?
Well, there's no doubt that animals are equal, but some are more equal. We have to accept that. And when you talk about countries in Africa, we have to accept that some countries, by virtue of what they have been endowed with, have certain greater leverage. And they have to use that greater leverage that they have in their own interest, in the interest of their sub-region, and in the interest of Africa. Egypt is one such country.
Sure.
South Africa is one such country. My own country, Nigeria, is one such country. Now, wherever Africa wants to go, and these three countries are not going along, or one of them is not going along, then we are not ready to move as fast
as we should be,
as
we can.
So Egypt was leading the negotiation. Then Nigeria took over the negotiation of Africa Continental Free Trade Area. But what went wrong inside Nigeria itself,
right,
is that when the negotiation was going on, the people internally, Manufacturers Association, Chambers of Commerce, and all that, that should have been carried along, that should have been briefed as the negotiation was going on, were not briefed. And when the government took the decision, they had a cabinet meeting, and the cabinet approved. Then alarm was raised by the Manufacturers Association, by the Chambers of Commerce, that, hey, what's going on here? We don't know. And then the government said, well, all right, hold. We will now inform you, we will carry you along. I believe the same sort of thing happened in South Africa. And for Nigeria and South Africa, I know that the protocols have to be approved by the parliament. Yeah. And if you do not carry them along as well, yeah, you will have another problem. So, but the president of South Africa was in Kigali, and he was able to see what was going on. So he was able to sign the declaration, but not the protocol.
Yeah.
I believe that if my president had also been in Kigali, yeah, he would have been able to see what was going on, sure, and he would have been able to sign the declaration and maybe leave the protocol till another time. But I believe that before we have the meeting of AU, yeah, again in July, Nigeria should be on board.
Yeah, I can't remember where he was, but I'm hoping it was not that time when you went to that other place, and then, yeah, he failed to get what we wanted and what we thought he should be getting. But let me come to you, Minister. I just wanted to know if there's a dialogue that's going on to bring in not only South Africa and Nigeria on board, but also the other African countries that haven't signed up. We know 45, 54, 44. We know African territories are 55. So there's a lot more that needs to come in.
I think we had some discussion in Kigali, and I think, as His Excellency mentioned, there are some legal barriers that they have to go through. But in my view, the train left the station. There is a significant strength for the agreement to happen, even, yeah, with the 44. Of course, Nigeria and South Africa, as the first and third economy in Africa, are important to be part of it. But it's also important that the train move. So even with the 44 countries,
Yeah.
when people realize the importance and the benefit of the Africa CFTA,
Yeah.
I have no doubt that they will join.
I see you're gently reminding me that number 2 is inside, it's not sitting outside, and number
That
2,
is
of course,
correct.
is Egypt. Thank you very much. Mr. Rama, from your perspective, let's talk practical solutions that can entice the likes of Nigeria, South Africa to come on board.
The practical solutions?
Yes, sir. Your
Well,
bread and butter.
No, the practical solutions is the benefits of intra-regional trade. I think that they are not signing is not because they don't recognize the value of intra-African.
It's politics.
It's because maybe the national the legal processes at home that they have to comply with. Because if you look at it, South Africa, for example, is a leading intra-African trading
Player, yes.
And because they joined the African Export-Import, that means that they recognize the importance of intra-African trade.
Yeah.
Because we are working with the Export Credit Agency to put in place a $1 billion facility to support trade between South Africa and the rest of Africa,
Yeah.
means they understand the value of intra-African trade.
Yeah. Did you remind them they're sitting outside?
Well, they know that they had to go through a legal process.
Okay.
So it's
So
not
it's friendly, it's not antagonistic.
No, I don't think it's antagonistic. They just have to go through the processes so that it's smooth. Otherwise, as President Mutizwa mentioned, the executives will sign and then they get to difficulties where they have to ratify it.
Sure.
So it will not make progress. So it's important that they be given the time, and hopefully before long,
Yeah.
they will come on board.
Yeah.
Well, let me come here. Sorry if I may. I think I was in Kigali, and what I saw in Kigali really delighted me. One, the eve of the signing, the feeling among leaders is that probably we won't get more than 25 countries to sign.
Sure.
And we got 44. Secondly, they decided among themselves that 22 ratification will bring it into force. Now, they could jolly well have gone for 50%.
For sure.
But they say 22 will bring it to force. They went a step further. They taxed themselves. They give themselves a timeline and said they want to see it come into effect within 6 months. Some people said, no, that's too short a period.
Sure.
But they said, look, let us give ourselves a target that we will work to. I think those are very good signs that I saw. And I believe that, as the minister said, the train has left the station.
Yeah.
In fact, the rest of us will have to make sure we catch up with it. Otherwise, 22 countries will ratify.
Yeah.
They will keep going. And if you do not join them, the train, you will have to really take a helicopter to catch up.
Minister, you want to come
I
in?
need to also put a comment here. Free trade agreement required education.
Right.
Education to the manufacturers.
Sure.
It's very easy for me to imagine my country is closed, I have the own country, no one can export, I put a barrier. The world has changed. Egypt is probably one of the countries which probably have the highest level of free trade agreement. We have with the EU, we have with all the Arab countries, Turkey, COMESA, Mercosur, and we're negotiating as we speak, and hopefully Africa free trade agreement, and we're negotiating also the Euro-Asia.
Yeah.
It required preparation internally, and it required a lot of education for people to understand the mutual benefits. Every agreement has mutual benefits. It cannot be one way. And the negotiation which happened even within Africa, it considers the development stage of every country, when the custom barriers will be removed and giving the chance for the country to develop themselves in that particular sector and so forth.
Yeah.
So education, in my view, to inside the country is quite important.
Sure. Mr. Ramad, part of that education is, of course, one of the key ingredients that's been missing, and you've been talking about it a little bit, and I wanted you to expand on it. Market information, the ability to know what Egypt produces versus South Africa versus Nigeria versus Morocco versus Kenya.
Yeah, for us, we think that is the biggest constraint to intra-African trade today. Because even without the Continental Free Trade Area, Africa trades, the total value of African trade is about $1 trillion. And Africa's intra-African trade share of that $1 trillion is just about 15%, $150 billion. A lot of people talk about the constraint of infrastructure. But the way we look at it is that the infrastructure constraint is a generalized constraint. Infrastructure constrains total intra-African trade. The question is, why is it that within the $1 trillion that the stock of infrastructure can carry, intra-African trade share is just $150 billion.
We have a lot of free capacity that we're not utilizing.
Why is it not $400 billion? And that's because of trade information. We did a study with the UN and the Commonwealth Institute, and we found very, very interesting things. Kenya was importing certain kinds of leather products they were using to manufacture shoes. The same leather products is being exported by Burundi at a lower cost.
Sure.
But because the Kenyans didn't know, they are buying it from New Zealand.
Oh, goodness.
So you have things like that. People are buying things that they would have bought from within the continent, and they buy them at a much higher cost. And that's actually trade diversion. Because if people knew that it would be cheaper to buy the same thing from just across the border, they would buy those things. But because of the colonial barriers that were created, people do not have information, people do not relate with each other. It's not possible for this information to flow around. So what are we doing about it? The Intra-African Trade Fair is one major initiative we want to use. The Intra-African Trade Fair would we open the platform for connecting African businesses, make it possible for people to know what is going on within Africa, make it possible for intra-African investments to occur. We are also building a trade portal that will make it easier to vend trade information to a large number of people using mobile apps and so on.
This is on the Afreximbank website? Or on the intra-African?
It's a trade portal that would make it possible for those who have even mobile phones and all that to be able to get it
from wherever you are.
Some of them will be free, some will be paid for.
Sure.
But at least you will be able to know what is available in the different African countries. And we know that the AU also has a project for that. They're working with the ITC to do an observatory that also will try to provide trade information as widely as possible.
Sure. Mr. Elsewood, from your perspective, initiatives such as the Intra-African Trade Fair, what difference do you see them making to your business? Because you're already there anyway. You're already making your money. Do you need it?
No, of course, it will make a big difference. If we are able to export to all these countries, if we trade now, this will make a very big difference, of course. Yeah.
In what way do you see that providing something extra for your business? Is it the information that you're talking about?
Yes, and you can see now even in competition with the international world, our exports from our company to Africa is very little. It's 1% of our exports.
At the moment?
Yes.
even though you are active in all these countries?
Yes, but you are available in these countries as services, as giving them electricity, giving them building power stations, but as individual exporting upwards, it's really not easy.
Yeah, because I'm thinking to myself, so you're using all this extra capacity to sell to other people in the world when you should be selling to Africans. Africans who we know, 66% of them, by the way, do not have access to electricity. That's 600 million Africans.
We export 40%.
Big opportunity for you.
Yeah. We export 40% to Europe and the other 40% to the Gulf region and less than 1% to Africa.
Sure. Okay,
But
let's get an intervention from someone who is also in business. You want to
answer the
Minister,
question, to answer exactly your questions. It's the connectivity. It's getting 70,000 people, business to business, or government to business, or government to understand what every country produce in order to enhance and further push trade between the African countries.
Sure. There's a big
And,
incentive.
and you know what we're trying to do? Once we do that, we begin to build a solid database about what is going on. And an element of the work we're doing on intra-African trade is having a virtual trade fair. And that virtual trade fair will continue even after the physical trade fair. And as we do that, information using new technology will be fed in. And over time, you will build a massive amount of data that will begin to change the narrative about the trade.
For sure. I'll come back to you because I want some targets in terms of how many companies you're trying to reach and the targets for intra-African trade. I wanted to get an intervention from Mr. This engineer Ahmed El Bihari, Managing Director of Egypt Telecom. I think I'm looking at him now. Yes, sir. Please come in and tell us the difference, or at least from your perspective, how you see things. Where's our microphone? Our microphone should be coming to you. If we can move quickly, we've got 9 minutes of the program left, so we need to make time. We need to make haste. Thank you. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for the surprise. I'll talk from a personal experience.
Yes.
I was very fortunate that I attended the 21st shareholder meeting for Afexim Bank. It was in Lusaka in Zambia, and I was very fortunate to have listened to His Excellency President Obasanjo as well there.
Yeah,
so,
I talked to him there.
And in that meeting, I think it was like in June 10th, 2015, and that day, I remember that President Sisi was signing the triplet agreement in the same day in Sharm el-Sheikh. And the emotions were very high inside the arena, and when the signature was announced. And everyone was very happy saying that Egypt is starting to be back to Africa. And I agree with that very much. I had the chance and was fortunate to roam around Africa somehow, east and west, and I think the opportunities is enormous. As you just mentioned, 600 million have no access to grid of electricity, 500 million plus has no access to clean water, and where we find difficulties, we see opportunities as well. Sure. So with that mindset, I think Africa is the place to go. However, as the minister said, the problem is the reach. The problem is information reach, sure, and people reach as well. And with the information availability with such a trade fair, and with the coming from technology part, I cannot sit here without mentioning financial inclusion. Yeah. Financial inclusion is essential to enhance intra-trade between African countries. Yeah. So having all that into perspective, I think if we have such a trade agreement put into place, yeah, and backed by a technological view, yeah, including financial inclusion, and I'm sure that Africa would be the place where the power lies in the coming decades.
Yeah. Does it matter when you go into Africa that you're Egyptian, or is it an advantage that you're Egyptian going into Africa?
What I said, and it was a surprise for me. You know, I was not, when I first went to Africa, I think it was as in business, as it was like 2012, 2013. It was in Senegal, Dakar. Yeah. And I was just surprised by the amount of the Egyptian heritage affection of the people. People told me that the first plane landed there after after Air France was Egypt Air. But unfortunately, at the time when I landed, there was no Egypt Air direct plane. So many people I met there was having lots of Egyptian names, actually. Sure. So yeah, it is somehow. I think I was very well welcomed around Africa when I went there. And to prove that, from just loving Africa, loving being there, and I succeeded that after a few years I attended such a meeting and with AFAXIM meeting in 21st shareholder meeting in Lusaka, sure. In Zimbabwe, in Zambia. And again, Africa is difficult. I agree, but Africa is lovable also. If you love Africa, Africa will give you back. Yeah. This is what I believe.
In the difficult lies the opportunity. I've got 6 minutes, and I need to divide them very quickly amongst yourselves, gentlemen. Mr. President, can I begin with you first of all? I want you to combine two things, your closing thoughts and also a time frame for which you see all of Africa under the Africa Free Trade Area.
What do I see?
All of Africa, all African countries having joined the Africa Free Trade Area.
Well,
your closing thoughts.
I believe that Africa Continental Free Trade Area will be up and going before the end of next year. Definitely. I believe that by the year 2020, half of African countries will be participating in the free trade area.
Sure.
I challenged Afrexim Bank when I had their, I think, is it your 20th year anniversary?
Yes.
And they seem to be going along that challenge, that they should get the intra-African trade to 25%. And
when did you say you should have done that?
I gave you a time.
You have targeted it 2021.
By 2021?
Yes.
2021?
Yes.
The only problem now, Mr. President, is that we are recording this, so I will come back and I'll hound you with the tape.
Well, I gave them that challenge, 2021. Let's see how much they can do. But I reckon that by the year 2030, yes. And 2030 is very significant because the Sustainable Development Goal comes in at the end of the year 2030. Yeah. I believe that we will be trading in intra-African trade will not be less than 50%.
Thank you, sir. Mr. El Sawidi, your closing thoughts?
About Africa?
About Africa, about the opportunity presented by the Africa Free Trade Area?
I think this is really perfect for all of us, and I think it's really perfect even for Egyptians, especially. Because this will give us the opportunity to tackle Africa more, and will give us possibility to even to improve our industry and to make more experts.
Do you have a target for how much you want to see coming out of Africa?
I can't say, but I hope the best.
Okay. Minister?
I think Egypt is connected to Africa politically, socially, and economically. So Africa is very important for us. We've developed a clear export and investment strategy for Africa. Infrastructure is extremely important. It has to be developed. We're working from our side. We have today we have a direct shipping line to Kenya. We're working on West Africa. We've opened the largest logistics center in Kenya. We're also working on opening another 2 in West and middle of Africa. Africa is over 1 billion people. It's a young population. It's probably the 2nd biggest population in the world, fastest economy, and in terms of a growth. So the future is there.
Sure.
We're looking to effectively enhance the African CFTA and endorse it. We're looking also for the IATF, which will happen end of this year.
Yes.
I think it's a great opportunity to connect business to business. We're also inviting trade ministers for Africa to connect a couple of days before that. Everybody's investing in China.
Yep.
China is investing in Africa.
For sure.
So this is the future.
Mr. Orama, the opportunity is yours.
Well, our President Bank is the African bank. Intra-African trade is the arrowhead of our strategy. That's what we breed. That's what we do every day. We are investing a lot of time and effort to make sure that we realize the objectives of the Continental Free Trade Area. Our objective is that we will disburse $25 billion in the next 5 years in support of intra-African trade. We are also providing other support to bring down the barriers to the trade. The intra-African trade fair is one of them. We're developing a Pan-African payment and settlement platform to make sure that we reduce the foreign currency content of intra-regional trade. We're helping to develop production capacities through supporting industrial park construction across the continent. So everything we're doing, everything we do every day is focused at promoting intra-African trade. And we believe we will more than achieve the goal that President Obasanjo has set for us.
Absolutely. The camera is rolling. Thank you, sir, for those words. I remember the Africa Rising narrative, and I remember it rose and fell on the basis that, well, commodities changed, and I'm hoping that this is not one of those initiatives as well that will go in a similar direction. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for sitting here and listening to us, and thank you at home for watching. Until next time, goodbye from us in Cairo. Thank you.